How do you do? Mr. Carl Emley feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now is your chance to, well, we've warned you.
I am Dracula. I bid you welcome.
It's alive!
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
We belong dead.
Welcome to this episode of The Good, the Bad and the Universal. We're your hosts, Mark and Sam. Today we'll be talking about 1931's Frankenstein. Okay, this follows on from Dracula in terms of Universal production. I think the success of Dracula, which was pretty good, pretty phenomenal actually, spurred them to carry on in this vein, and they were looked for another property. And eventually Frankenstein emerged. It was released in the same year, I presume a lot later in the year. Dracula must have been released fairly early, 1931 again. And this was directed by James Whale, though there was another director in the frame for a lot of the time called Robert Florey. James Whale got the gig because he'd made a success for a standard drama called Journey's End, I think. And they wanted to keep him on board, and they were interested in involving him. And apparently various other people were involved in the cast. Bela Lugosi was touted as both the Doctor and the Monster at one point, and various other people were nominated for the roles. Bette Davis, who's a fairly famous actress, was going to be Elizabeth, and Leslie Howe was going to be Dr. Frankenstein. That all changed when James Whale came on board. He knew both Colin Clive and Boris Karloff and wanted to use them. Okay, enough of the sort of backgrounds. What do you think of this one?
It was pretty good.
Pretty good. I think it's iconic, actually. I think it's an iconic film. Certainly the creature is an icon. Comparable to Lugosi's Dracula. When someone says Frankenstein, this is the Frankenstein you think of, isn't it? Yeah. This is the most distinctive, that flat head and so on. And we've seen it for a million different sort of pop culture filters now. We've got Herman Munster and various cartoons where there's a flat-headed Frankenstein and stuff like that. It was a bit of a shocker in its day, and it actually pretty much was I know Dracula came before this, but I think this was the film that really created the fairly large Universal horror cycle. And loads of other studios jumped on the bandwagon and tried to make horror films too, though none of them quite captured the spirit of the Universals. Though, I mean, I think things like Freaks came close, and Island of Dr. Moreau and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There was a few from other studios that were kind of cool, but the Universal really did the run of a big run of monster movies. Yeah. Okay, let's start again. It starts with the interesting introduction by a narrator, it's not a narrator, but it's an introducer. It's nothing to do with the film, just telling you about, You've Been Warned, which is kind of a bit of showmanship from Universal. Kind of cool. Yeah. It was alright, wasn't it? The print we watched was really quite fantastic too.
I do like stuff where the narrator comes on, like Outer Limits, with the whole we control the vertical.
Yeah, well, that's a spoken one, but yeah, I know what you mean. But I mean, it's been done to death now. I mean, Rocky Horror did it, didn't it? With this separate narrator talking about the action. It's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of 50s and 60s American TV used that sort of idea as well. I think Twilight Zone did as well. I'm trying to think of some others. I'm sure there are others. I mean, Night Gallery. Rod Serling seems to really like that. I think a lot of detective shows from America from that time used it, but I'm not up to speed on those, so I don't know for sure. It's kind of an interesting way to start the film. It gets the blood going, gets the audience keyed up a bit, doesn't it? Say, we've warned you, and all this kind of business. And we get... What do you think of the, let's say, the acting? What do you think of the acting in this?
I think it was okay. It was probably good for the time, but I've got more used to, like...
realistic acting, yeah. It was very stagey. I have to say, I thought there were 4 good performances in it, and possibly 5 if you included Maria's father. I thought he was quite good too. The 4 I've got in mind, I thought Colin Clive was pretty good as Henry Frankenstein. Dwayne Fry I always like, I think he gave a good... But obviously Boris Karloff gave a performance of the ages in this one, really. Yeah. And I also like the Baron, the old Baron. I thought he gave a good... he was like, what are you talking about? What nonsense? Yeah. I thought he gave a good... It was a bit pantomime, but it was good. It wasn't even stagey. It was just a bit... It was a broadly drawn character. And I thought it was quite kind of cool. I really didn't like the wife. I thought she was a terrible actress. And the oily, old oily, his so-called friend who was like looking after his wife. Yeah, I bet he was. Yeah. Called Victor, bizarrely. Yeah. Victor Moritz, I think, was his character.
Apparently in the book, it's the names are changed, so it's Henry something.
It's Henry Clerval and Victor Frankenstein. I don't know why they swapped around. It's a bit confusing because I always think of Victor when I say Frankenstein.
I've got something here. It says the producers felt Victor sounds too unfriendly and severe.
Right, okay. Weird. And we get this absolutely great performance from Karloff, really. Now, apparently, a lot of his look and movement, certainly not his face, but his movement and his bulk was inspired by a 20s film called The Golem, which I think there might have been actually several versions of The Golem in the 20s or the 10s and 20s, but it was kind of inspired, that hulking, the Hulk, as it were. What do they call it in gaming, where there's a big, is it a tank or Hulk? Or that hulking sort of thing was modelled a bit on that, but the makeup was all Jack Pierce, who was like Universal's #1 guy for makeup. He created all the really famous horror looks, except for maybe Dracula. I think Lugosi came out with that himself. Apparently Lugosi tried to come up with makeup for the monster, but it was rejected when he was sort of screen tested, and he didn't like the part anyway because he wasn't speaking. But he was like a worldwide hit, Lugosi, after Dracula, but it was rapidly overtaken by Karloff and then really didn't recover. I mean, he had a few stars. He was a good actor in later films, but he never really recovered from that. And if he'd have taken apart Frankenstein, he might have been the horror star of the 30s.
Yeah,
on his own, really. But it didn't happen that way. Also, apparently, Karloff famously got on really well with Jack Pierce, and not many people did. He was pretty irascible and aggressive, but Karloff got on with him. I think probably his English charm got him past Jack Pierce's sort of hard sheen. So he actually got on really famously. So Jack Pierce was really happy working with Karloff and like trying out things. Karloff was willing to sort of go along with anything he wanted to try. So he came out with some great makeup. What did you think of the direction?
It was pretty... In places it was pretty good, but there were points where stuff happened that just didn't make sense, I think.
Well, you mean like the monster fight happened to stumble across Elizabeth's room somehow?
And there was stuff that just like completely ruined the moment. Like in that scene, there's a bit where he's like slowly creeping up on her. She turns around, screams, and he sort of goes, heh, heh, heh.
Yeah, that wasn't in character, really, was it? No. Some people have theorised that the monster in this is almost like seeing a human grow, different stages of growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a baby at the beginning, he's reaching for the light
Yeah.
and sort of mumbling, and then he's more like a teenager. He's fighting with,
Yeah.
And then finally he sorry, that comes a bit later. That's is the shot you were talking about. It's more like the teenager, but then he gets to be from an infant to a child when he's playing with the little girl. And apparently, the bit where he threw the little girl in was cut from some prints early on, but it wasn't what I thought. I thought it was the studio or the censor mate asking for that. So it was Karloff. Karloff wanted the cuts because he didn't like it. He wanted the monster to place the girl in the water, not throw her in. Yeah, so it's more like play, and she wouldn't be screaming. Though she would be screaming, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
He wanted it more like that, which I kind of see, but it works.
No, it makes more sense that the monster throws them because they were throwing the flowers.
Yeah,
and that's
it's
what
true.
He knows.
You're right, and he's clumsy and he's not very well coordinated. So it kind of makes sense that he throws her in a clumsy way, doesn't he? Kind of thing. That I think the really devastating shot is actually not her throwing him in, but when the father carries the girl through the party. And the party slowly realises what's happened. I thought that was kind of devastating, really. Really strong stuff. Considering it was 1931, a really great shot. Not much talked about because the most famous thing is throwing the little girl in, because it's easy to sort of talk about that. But the whole scene with him carrying the little girl and she's like limp and wet, dripping, it's like, oh man. Yeah, that was. I like. There was a lot of skeletons in this, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I kept pointing out. I think I got on your nerves after a while.
Yeah, you did.
Because it's like, look, there's a skull.
It's like, hey, a skull. Hey, a skeleton. Look at all this skull imagery. Yeah. You definitely won't have noticed this.
Yeah, and there's like, if there ain't a skeleton in it, there's a shadow of a skeleton in it. Some of the lighting was really interesting too. The sort of side lighting, especially I noticed it first with the gravedigger. Was putting his coat on and wiping his brow, and you could see he was lit from behind, and it gave him a shadow over his face and stuff like that. And we couldn't resist quoting Young Frankenstein as we were watching that. There were some shots in it straight from Young, that they'd obviously copied completely in Young Frankenstein, especially where Fritz and the doctor are digging up the coffin and like wheeling it through town. And there's also a bit where he cuts down the hangman, doesn't he? And then complains his neck's broken.
Oh,
so, no, really?
Busted.
What a surprise.
I guess you could hang someone if the neck's...
You could just choke and the neck could be intact, I suppose. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I never thought of that. And I like the castle was well creepy. They got one right on the top of the hill. But that makes sense, because
I think
he would want one on top of the hill, wouldn't he, for the electric?
Yeah, I actually think that may have been the cut, like the big set from Dracula, just with an added wall.
It looked a bit like it, yes. There were elements very similar. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Not at all. Some of because we were watching the Blu-ray and it was like a pristine condition, you could really see it was a hung backdrop. You could see the ripples in the curtain, not the curtain, the whatever you call it, the canvas. It was painted on, so that was a bit detracting.
Yeah.
But there was I think it's quite an effective film. It just moves along at a real pace. It's been massively influential, but it still stands alone as a decent film. We have to be a bit forgiving about it because it's made in the early 30s, the earliest days of sound cinema. And I'm interested in what you perceive as the difference as we go through the different films. And obviously that they've learned about, film processing and direction, and they've mastered some of the sound techniques and stuff like that. So I'm interested in your point of view when we get to some of the later films where they've obviously become more sophisticated in terms of filmmaking. If you notice the difference, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to it too as well, actually, because I'm not quite sure how it pans out. But I like the end.
Yeah.
With the windmill, I thought that bit where Henry falls on across the bar. Though, even though we could see it's a dummy, it's kind of, oh wow, it's one of those. It's like seeing someone kicked in the balls. It's kind of like, oh, that would have hurt if you'd have fallen across that. You'd have break your back pretty much. I'm surprised he wasn't dead, frankly. But there you go. He just looked a bit ill in the end, didn't he? We get our. I reckon this is the first time on film we get the angry lynch mob, angry pitchforks and torches mob, but maybe not. I don't know enough about film to be sure. There's probably some in Hunchback actually from the 20s, and probably Phantom as well. But we haven't watched
there
it.
was definitely some in Hunchback.
Yeah. So, but we get a fair old mob going on, and they don't know it's a monster, do they? They just know he's a murderer.
Yeah.
And they're not that perplexed or horrified when they see he's 7 foot tall with a flat head. They just carry on anyway. There's some weird stuff in this though, like the Fritz tormenting the monster with a torch, deliberately sticking a torch in his face while they're trying to calm him down. It's like really weird. Why would you do that?
Why would they not just get rid of Fritz? Send Fritz away. I mean,
yeah, and we don't see much of it. We just see Fritz kind of hanging. We assume he's been hung, which is odd. How would the monster
got hung by his whip or something?
Yeah, how would the monster's not coordinated? But apparently he was hung on a hook, but they cut that because it was too strong. So in fact, he's hung on a hook, but we don't know that because it's not obvious from watching the film. The cut we've got. But there you go. So that explained that to us. But I mean, as a film watcher, it was kind of a bit perplexing. The lab was really cool as well. All the electrical stuff. They did a really bang up job. Apparently this would cost $250,000 and it took $25 million.
Wow.
So they made 100-fold profit on it, which isn't bad, is it? Not bad. Tiny bit of work, and it basically funded Universal for a couple of years, I would imagine, and started off the horror cycle. Though they weren't quite sure, they took their time about this. The next one
I would be a little bit anxious because, okay, you got a fairly big leap of logic here. It's just people are going to accept that you can make a monster out of body parts.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I guess the story was probably well known. In fact, going back to the original story, and it's considered by many as like the start of modern science fiction. And you can kind of see why. There isn't really any books like it before it. There's some about different civilizations, like Thomas More's Utopia, but really this is a pure science fiction. Well, it's definitely science. It's horror as well, but it's a science fiction story. Constructing humans like this. It was kind of cool. I did like Colin Clive a lot as the mad. I like the bit where he says things like, "Call me crazy, will you? Come here.
Come and see my sewn together man."
Corpse. Yeah, that was kind of funny. I would have liked a little more Fritz in it. He was kind of underwritten. He was there, but he didn't have much of a part. I do like the old Dwight Fry. He makes me laugh. And I think in later films, there was a bit of humour in this, certainly with the Baron, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And it was interesting, there was a couple of toasts that presaged future films. There was a toast which was, "Here's to a son for the House of Frankenstein."
The House of Frankenstein.
And that's two sequels, Son of Frankenstein and House of Frankenstein. And then he also says Young Frankenstein at one point, doesn't he? Which is kind of fun.
It says something like that. We hope that there will be a young
Frankenstein, yeah. And could you see how much Young Frankenstein was imitating this film? It was amazing. I think Mel Brooks did a great job actually in Young Frankenstein. They could play as a sequel.
Right down to using the Abby Normal joke.
Yes, the abnormal brain and all that. Old Fritz was a Butterfingers, wasn't he? Yeah. And the weird thing is, the reason he dropped the brain was a gong went off screen, and there was no explanation for that either, was there? A gong went off.
Just sort of did.
Weird. So there was lots of interesting elements. I think this film could be analysed quite a bit more deeply. I like the idea of it being the monster being effectively a growing human, from baby to angry, and quite rightly angry the way he's treated. I mean, he's treated abominably in this, isn't he? They chain him up and torment him, basically. So you can't really blame him for what he does. And the one murder he does is done in innocence, isn't it? It's not by malice. The real logical leap for me, not logical, the real story leap for me was him getting to Elizabeth's room on her wedding day. That just seemed weird. you know, he wandered into town and he picked that particular room just to serve the
Yeah.
story. Just
It seemed a
do
bit
what-
pantomime.
Yeah, there was some fairly sophisticated filmmaking in this for the time, though. There was the split set, wasn't it? The camera tracked across 3 rooms as people walked through doors. That was kind of cool. And I'm guessing it probably wasn't the first time it was used in film, but it was kind of sophisticated. He used a bit of Dutch angles here and there from German Expressionism. There was a few sort of sideways shots. Overall, it's pretty cool. What would you give it out of 10?
I'd give this an 8.
An 8. I give it a 9, and I think it's a solid 9. It's probably it's
The
close
only
to a
reason
10.
I'd give it an 8 instead of a 9 is more because it keeps going on about like loads of pseudoscience that they don't.
Yeah, there was a bit he was talking about. I've
Yeah.
forgotten about, which
There's,
freaked me out. The ray, the
there's
spectrum,
the thing about having a color of light greater than ultraviolet.
violet. Yes,
And there was the whole stuff about the only reason it's an abnormal brain is because it comes from a criminal.
yes.
It's like you can see from the thing all the sort of indentations.
Yeah,
and all
they
that.
really. There was some good old thing about the brain not having as many creases in and stuff like that, which is kind of a bit of that 30s nonsense, I think. To that, in that gross, descriptive kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bit silly. I forgot the color spectrum thing's just weird, actually. And I'm guessing ultraviolet was only discovered a few. I don't know for sure because I can't remember the history of science. But I'm guessing it was like in the zeitgeist, so it was put into this script. That's what I'm guessing. Don't know for sure though. I mean, Wow also went on to direct one that we're going to watch soon, which is The Old Dark House with Boris Karloff. But he also went on to direct the equally iconic Bride of Frankenstein, and I think one of the first female horror characters. There's not that many female horror characters actually when you think of it, but Bride of Frankenstein's out there. I guess it's her and Maria from Metropolis is probably the 2 really famous black and white ones.
Yeah, that's all I can think of.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll wind it up there. So you enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
Can you see why it was so how
Yeah.
it's been so? I mean, sorry, we live in 8 years after. We know it's influential because it's still around and people are still talking about it. And it is possibly the most iconic monster of all movie monster. I would think. Would you think?
No, I think the Dracula's
Dracula.
probably got a bit more.
Lugosi's Dracula
Yeah,
specifically.
Lugosi.
Yes. But it's certainly out there. It's certainly out there. Okay then. So bye from me.
Bye.